Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. We are live. Let us know where you're coming in from. I'm Marie Poulin. I'm here with Khe from RadReads, who has a blog and newsletter all about living an examined life, which I love. Khe also teaches a lot and has tons of videos around Notion. If you've never watched his stuff before, Khe, I'm a huge fan of your work, huge fan of your newsletter. I'm a huge fan of everything I've seen about your Notion stuff. So I am so excited to spend Valentine's Day with you.
Oh, thank you. And hello, everyone. I get so hyped to talk about Notion, to be here with Marie. And like I said, we were joking earlier, there are 5 love languages, but for a select group of us, there's a 6th one, and it's Notion. So what better
100%.
day than Valentine's Day to be spending this next hour with you?
Love it. And sounds like the majority of people have never been to an office hours before. So this is kind of exciting that this is people's first session. And a number of people are not in the RadReads community yet. I would say it's one of the few newsletters that I read start to finish every week that you send your newsletters.
Every week, sometimes
Yeah,
twice.
really great, great summaries, just great. Obviously, what we both chat about is very kind of in tune. So I love reading what you're putting out there. So let's talk a little bit about what it means to design your decade. It's the name of today's session. So I know that you talk so much about designing with intention, and I just kind of want to hear a bit about your philosophy around what it means to design your decade.
Absolutely. So, designing your decade, the most important thing for me and my coaching clients is that we are just bombarded with stuff. We are bombarded with information. We're bombarded with communication. We're bombarded with tasks, and it's a fire hose. And the issue that people always have, the issue that I have, is that you're always reacting. You react, and then it's like 5 o'clock, and you're like, oh, that
What have I got
strategy
done?
thing that I wanted to do, that thing I wanted to do with my kids. You have the lowest amount of energy left, the lowest amount of willpower left, and you've been doing other people's, you've been living someone else's agenda all day. And so I've really, really tried to focus, zoom out and think about what are the big things that move the needle, and to really step back and always start. I mean, you're great at this, Maria, and a lot of people in the Notion community. It's really to take that 10,000 view and say, what does it mean to live an intentional life, an examined life? And so, practically speaking, what that means is really just being deliberate about everything you do. And for me, that source of inspiration. So I turned 40 this past summer. So I've been reading productivity books and blogs and all that since before Google existed. And so a lot of I've been in this for half of my life, and a lot of the tactics that I use have been inspired by David Allen. GTD is a big source. And as we go through my setup, these concepts of inboxes, review, reflect, that is baked into living a more intentional life, which then can let you zoom out and say, okay, this is what I need to do in the next day, the next hour, the next day, the next year, and the next decade. And so David Allen, you're going to see David Allen's a big source of inspiration of mine. You're going to see James Clear, Charles Duhigg, a lot of cues and habit formation, where what I try to do is I try to take the combination of the left brain process oriented approach, like checklist manifesto type stuff, but also the magic of serendipity, where you kind of leave yourself little breadcrumbs and little seedlings of things to sprout. And I've found that you can't live on both ends of the spectrum. If you're just so process oriented, you're just gonna you're just going to execute, but you're not going to zoom out. And if you're too reliant on serendipity, it doesn't work for me. I know it works for some people, But you're just going to like start a lot of experiments and there'll be no feedback loop to like bring it back into focus. And so I'm trying, like in my system, I'm trying to like find that sweet spot. And I'm a solo entrepreneur. I'm a solopreneur. I'm a creator. I write a lot, but I have a lot of very functional parts of my personal life and my professional life. So kind of like create a framework that can bounce between those two and give you maneuverability.
I love that. And I'm curious. I always love to know kind of what things look like behind the scenes for people. But in terms of your calendar or time blocking, do you kind of set aside different chunks of the day for here's my maker time, here's my management time? You know, do you kind of break things up that way? The dreaming and the executing?
So one of the, yes and no. One big influence of mine is Tony Schwartz, who wrote the book, The Power of Full Engagement. It's kind of like an unheralded, you know, you've read a lot of these books, but I'm seeing that like, oh, you might not have read it or might not have heard of it. But Tony Schwartz, his big idea is that you should manage your energy and not your time. And so you're all familiar with that idea. But so I think of my day more in terms of energy, like managing energy. So that does lend itself. I'm a morning person. This morning I woke up at 4:45.
So envious.
And so, what's that?
I'm so envious.
Oh yeah, I go to bed at like 8:45. I have 2 kids, so I go to bed when they go to bed. And so my mornings are great until like 11 a.m. So from like 5 to 11 is like awesome time. There's like a lot of parenting time in that as well. But after that, it falls off a cliff. And it's quite precipitous, the cliff. And so I know that like my most creative work, I call them my big dominoes. It's like the one domino that you push that everything starts to like splay out. And that's a lot of like planning for the future and like doing these like really big things. I use a test there. One of my tests is Khe from 5 years is sitting on your shoulder like a little bobblehead. And it's 5 years from now, and you've achieved what you want to achieve over that 5-year period. And so the bobblehead is sitting on your shoulder as you're working, and it's nodding or shaking its head, and because it knows what the 5-year plan looks like, and it's kind of guiding you. And it's such a silly test, but it's never shaking. It's never like nodding in approval, shaking its head in approval when I'm like on Slack. But when I'm like taking detailed notes on some like great book, it's like, oh yeah, I'm glad you're doing that. And so whatever will kind of like be that big domino will like pass that bobblehead test tends to be earlier in the morning. And I know I write every day for 1 to 3 hours. I cannot write after lunch. It just like the creativity it's just not there. So what does that mean? Little like tweaking things. A lot of my execution happens after lunchtime, and a lot of my creation happens before lunchtime. That's kind of like the bookmarking of my day. But again, that's going to change. I have young kids now, so it kind of shifts everything earlier in the morning. I imagine when my kids become teenagers, it will probably start to push things back later into the days. So that might change as well. And then there's one little X factor. I surf every day, and so I watch the tides very carefully. The tides, the moon, like the wind. And so that will be the one thing besides my parental
that will trump everything else.
That will trump everything. Like screw the writing, everything's lining up. And I like grab my board and I run to the ocean.
That is incredible. And that makes sense that you're living your life with so much intention, because you're like, if I want to seize the day and get everything out of that day, I kind of need to be paying attention to the signals and what's happening to kind of squeeze everything out of a day.
And could I contrast that to like, because this is all pretty new for me. This is like 4 years in the making. I had 35 years, 35 adult years, but like 15 professional years where I was just, I worked on Wall Street. I was a financial analyst, and I was just, yes, sir, can I have another? Can I have another? What's next? What's next? Pick it, take this, call on this. And so there was this like important, like, actual shift, like leaving that industry. But I think that, and I'm part of what I do now is I'm a coach. So I coach people, and I tell people this like solo creator maker life it may look great on the outside, but there's a lot of things that it's very, very, very difficult. And
Different
so
challenges, right?
different challenges, burnout, structure, day structure, prioritization. So I
Self-management,
always
yeah.
tell people that are in more kind of structured work environments that don't think that intentionality only comes when you drop everything and quit your job. Intentionality can come in a 9 to 5. It can come in your marriage. It can come with how you interact with your, faith communities. It's not just this thing about like burning all the ships and going out on your own. And we can talk about the different systems for that.
I love that. I'm curious if anyone in the chat can maybe relate to that a little bit. I know that I've definitely done that sort of, cycle of burnout too, where you're just, stacking your schedule full of client work and you're like, got to make the money, got to pay the bills. And you kind of put your own creative pursuits on the back burner. And you end up burning yourself to a crisp when you don't have those creative outlets and when you're not profitable while factoring in those creative outlets as well, right?
Oh yeah, I mean that's something too for freelancers and solopreneurs is that there's a scarcity mindset where if you say no to a client or a prospect, then that prospect will be completely gone forever. You'll
And your
never
business
hear
is
from them.
over. Yeah.
They will like disintegrate into particles of dust, and the check that they had waiting for you will evaporate. And I think, I mean, a lot of what I write about and think about and coach about is how do you get out of that mindset? And so part of, and look, I'd be lying to say that a system in Notion will be the panacea to that. But there are little things that you can do to kind of like set your future self up to succeed. And that's a big part of this. This is actually something that I drew a lot of inspiration from Tiago Forte and building a second brain. And Para, it's like, you don't know your future self. You think you do, and you don't know your future circumstances. You don't know your future clients. You don't know where the world is, right? Like 2 years ago, most of us weren't using Notion, right? So, and look at us now, right? So you couldn't have planned for that, but you can give yourself the little like breadcrumbs and seeds to help that future self, that future version of you, to be in the best position to succeed and capitalize.
Yeah, I love the idea of sort of biasing the circumstances in your favor, right? By sort of, in a way, designing or increasing the luck surface area, I think was something that they said in a mastermind when I tried to play off something as luck. And they were like, no, but you've created that surface area to increase your chances of being more lucky.
Yeah, what is it? Luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity or something.
Totally. Yeah. It's never just one thing. Well, I love this. I could chat about all of this all day long. And so I'd love to dive in. If you're open to it, maybe we can screen share your system and maybe you can give us a bit of a walkthrough of.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so much fun stuff. All right. So let me hit up my screen share.
I mean, one of the things that really, I think, drew me into Notion was that ability to show my big goals and intentions in the same place that I'm doing my execution. So, like you said, favoring it, making it easy to see all the time, that it's just kind of top of mind and you're not having to click 10 clicks, to find the thing that is most important.
Yep. So one of the starting points, and this is like I really had taken a minimalist approach to Notion. I don't want a lot of files and pages and just like noise, like a clean, declutter your space, declutter your mind, right? Like I take a very Marie Kondo approach to this. And also, like, since I love surfing, you're just going to see surfing imagery everywhere. But before I even get in, I want to say that, like you, Marie, I use databases often, and everything you'll see my taskbar is just very light. There's no tables in it. There's no like straggly pages. And this is because you couldn't distill my workspace into a handful of databases. And so if you go in here, these are the databases. And you'll see that they all have JJ in front of them, which is so nerdy, but I've gotten so used to it. Before Notion fixed their search, which is like amazing now, it was very hard to get to these key tables. And so I just use JJ because no words start with JJ. And then it would just always bring up like my 5 tables that I use. And so by habit now, I just, I like Control P and I hit JJ, and then right away it pulls up like my main tables. And so it's like just a really quick way to navigate. And if you're wondering why JJ, I was inspired by Superhuman because J is, if you're right-handed, is where your finger lands naturally on the keyboard. So it literally is like the least amount of time to get to. I don't really use the mouse much in Notion. So I would say the main tables are Para. And for those who aren't familiar, that's a file management framework by Tiago Forte, who was one of the guests, a friend of mine, a fellow course creator. And we'll talk about that. But Para kind of is like if you think of like my Windows Explorer. Tasks is a master. These are all master databases. Tasks are where all of my tasks across every dimension of my life, ranging from my bucket list to the little micro tasks that needs to be done. CRM are all the people in my life. And so that is just like every person, their birthday, addresses, things like that. And again, I don't use a full-fledged CRM, but it's like, how can I set my future self up to succeed? How can I gift the important people in my life the most important things they need to succeed? So it's very much focused. It's very Adam Grant, who wrote the book Give and Take, inspired on like a give first mentality. So that's why I use a CRM, not as like a salesperson. And then library is where like I clip everything. And I write RadReads. It's a newsletter with lots and lots of links. And you go into the library, and I'm not clicking on them because I want to show you how I access them outside. I never actually click into them. And then tags, global tags, I'm playing with it. Not really a thing that I'm doing much of yet. And then editorial calendar, like my atomic unit of work is like writing and the idea. So I'm constantly keeping track of all of my my story ideas inside this editorial calendar. So everything in Notion that I do can be found in one of these. I guess that's six tables. So with that, we'll jump into where I spend most of my time, which is the Para. My Para setup, which you could almost, I think you call this Marie HQ. And so this is really every dimension of my life. And it's organized, as you could see through Tiago Forte's framework. It's actually a modified Para, but projects, areas, resources, and the last thing, the modified part is what I call BHAGs, which is inspired by Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, which is big, hairy, audacious goals. And so I have 3 BHAGs for each dimension of my life, which is business. So I have a revenue target, personal/hobbies, which is surf new spots without fear. And then kind of like spiritual and heart is like a true commitment to community service. And so I've just added that. It doesn't fit cleanly into the Para framework, but it's an important part. And these are again, when you think of designing your decade, it's like, you have a year-end goal, you want to chip away at it like one step at a time. And so you'll see how that actually manifests into its day-to-day, into my day-to-day. And so, by the way, I'm not seeing if there's questions, so I'm just going to rely on you, Marie, if you need me to pause or slow down. So what do you see next? What you see next is again, you see the GTD philosophy here, which is this review function. Because a lot of the things in our lives, like long-term goals, areas, which are things like, like things for self-improvement, your kids, your marriage, there's no like task, right? It's not like be a better husband, like check, okay, week 4, be a better husband, check. Like these are this like nebulous part, especially this areas column. It's the classic Eisenhower box of things that are important, but not urgent. They don't have a deadline, so you snooze on them. You're like, I know I should sleep more, but I got this project now, so I'm gonna wait till this project's over. And like 4 years go by and you haven't improved your sleep. And so what I do with the David Allen GTD approach is I'm always trying to surface up, like, what do I need to be thinking about? Make it obvious. Use little cues. And so I drop these little cues everywhere. This is the classic James Clear. You want to work out more? Put your gym clothes by your door. You got to walk out of your door every day. You see your gym clothes, you're more likely to work out. And so you'll see that there are little cues here. What's one cue? I just changed the color of the icon. Like this is the most important. I'm taking this intensive course right now. This is the most important like near-term project. And then areas, which are things that I just like need to maintain a standard, a threshold of performance. Managing my Notion course, we're in session right now. So I'm constantly like thinking about what needs to be done there. So little cue there, just the color, right? I guess it's a Notion feature. Second cue. How many days overdue? So each of these parts of my life have different review cycles. So like something like myself might be, every 6 months. Something like my family finances might be every couple days. And so these are based on, and we could, if you want, we could look at the actual formulas. But what's happening is I assign a review function, and it tells me. It looks at the last time I modified the page, and then it tests. I test often off of modified date, so that I don't have to like type in like last updated on January 24th.
Yeah,
I can just like I could cheat. I could like add a space, or I could actually do something in the page, and then it will disappear. So if you go into like RadReads newsletter, where there's like a bunch of this is one of my areas. You'll see some of my tasks that link from my database. Create a good survey that's inspired by the book Setting the Table by Danny Meyer. But let's see, the lead magnet ideas. Okay, I did this. This is like a lazy checklist. So I click that. Watch what happened. I'm gonna go back. Oops. I'll go back to my Para screen. It popped out. It's no longer overdue.
And Cassie just asked, how do you assign a review function? So I don't know if you want to go a little bit more into the nitty gritty of kind of how you actually set that up, or.
Yeah, absolutely. Is the question more theoretical, or is it like the logistics of Notion? And I can answer both.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Cassie, do you want to clarify what you meant by that? Were you curious kind of how we actually set up that formula to do that, or?
And while she's answering that, I'll just start with the very brief theoretical, because I think this is super important. So, okay, the classic example is your rent and your bucket list. Your rent has to be paid on the first of every month, and there are serious consequences if you don't pay it. I would assume most people on this call are good on their rent. They've got a system that works. The stakes are too high. Your bucket list, though, is like, I don't know, say one of your bucket list items, like one of my bucket list items is to surf in South Africa. And that might not happen for, I don't know, 5-ish years from now. So where would that go, right? So think about the review function of surf in South Africa. If it's in your bucket list, it's something that's dang important to you. but you can't put a due date on it. You put it on your Google Calendar. That's you're kind of misusing the tool, like the Google Calendar tool. So what David Allen would say is you would assign a review frequency. You would say, every year I should review my bucket list. And depending on your app, whether you use Notion, whether you use OmniFocus, whether you use Things, if your system is working right, that list, your bucket list, disappears for a year. And then it comes back a year later with some kind of flag or sign or something that says, hey, look at me. Like, did you think about me? Have you advanced the goal on this? And oftentimes, if it's a bucket list, right, you're talking about things that have like 5-7 year horizons, you could hit snooze, right? Maybe you need to take one little small step, like do a couple of days of research on like what's the best place, right? Just to like have a little bit of forward progress. And so those are like two extremes. And then there's something like in between, like, like your kids, right? And again, it could be like teaching them stuff or activities that you want to do, or not their bucket list. That might be every 3 months, right? Like you probably don't, the rhythm of fatherhood and parenting is like, you kind of know what your kids' needs are. But, every 3 months, you might want to check in on like, am I advancing their learning goals? That big family trip, that camping trip, that Disneyland trip, like, have I made progress towards that? And so that's a design question, and it really kind of needs to sync up with the review function should sync up with like the time horizon of that longer goal.
Cool.
Did we get clarity on the logistics
Yeah,
part?
I think so. I think they might want to see like your formula of how you just like, let's say you decide I want my newsletter to remind me every week.
Yep.
I guess how have you set that up from a formula perspective to make sure that that does remind you?
So the best way to do that, I'd probably go into Para. I'd probably go into like my actual. So when now you're asking to go behind the scenes, I would never go into this master database to like do stuff. I would only go here to start tweaking stuff, and so the formula is, I think I have a formulas tab. Yep, overdue formulas. Okay, so a few things happen. You have a last modified date, which kind of dynamically, so like QZ, this is I think in my archive, but watch, if I like add a space here, it popped out, right? So it will be at the very,
it resets the counter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it resets the counter, which is a really powerful tool. Especially like I really believe in resurfacing stuff that becomes stale. And so then the first one, so let's use like this one. So the first thing you have to do is you have to convert months to dates. And ignore the ones here because I was testing some stuff out. So monthly becomes 30. And so that is kind of not your standard, but it's your kind of standard if formula to convert text to numbers, right? And I actually have a blog post that walks you through all this that I could share later. So you convert your review frequency into an actual digit. Then you test that digit against between two things, right? So you look at the date between last update, right? Which is that's just a Notion field. And then there's two things happening. You're adding 30 days to the last update field, and you're testing it against today, which is now. It's a little confusing, but if you think about what's happening, you have three variables. 30 days, which is it's always going to be 30 for monthly. You have a dynamic field, which is last modified, a Notion field, and you have today, which is dynamic as well. So this is the cool thing. You have all these dynamic variables. You don't have to update any like days. And so you take the last modified date. Let's say it was modified 2 months ago. So let's say it was modified January 1st. Then you add 30 days to it. So it becomes January 31st. Today is February 14th. And so you test, is January 31st less than today, which is January 14th? And so the answer is yes. And then you would look at the difference between the two to see how many days it's overdue. And then the last trick you do, is that you then take those days and you use the concatenation formula to say like due in X, X days overdue. This is like pretty advanced stuff. So like on the fly, it might not make sense, but if you want to think about it, you have this variable now, like 9 days overdue, 9, and then you just basically take 9 and then you append it to days overdue, and that's how I do that dynamic string. But I want to just step back because I would assume that there's a lot of Notion like beginners or people who are new to Notion. Do not
don't get tripped up.
Yeah. Like the 2 days overdue, that is a cosmetic thing. Like I do it because I want it to look nice. But the most important thing is that it was filtered to the top and that something told me it was overdue. Yeah. That's the most important thing. And that's very much accessible.
And I'm assuming when you first started using Notion, I mean, it probably wasn't using too many databases. It was kind of like we didn't have all this kind of amazingness layered in. And it's only over time as you get to know the tool and you learn what you need, right? And kind of how you operate that you can layer it in slowly. So I know it can probably be easy to kind of get tripped up. And I know when some people see my interrelational databases and everything, they kind of go like, oh my gosh, the fire hose. It's like, hold on, it did not look like that a year ago. Like, let's start with version 1, right?
And always remember why are you doing this? And so like my why do I want to be more productive is I want to be more productive so I can double down on the most important people and projects in my life.
Yeah.
If like creating a 4 days overdue formula is not advancing that cause, don't do it.
Totally.
And so and the other thing I want to do, I want to share is there's this tweet, I think it's by Naval Ravikant, where he says, don't give me the book, give me the podcast. Don't give me the podcast, give me the blog post. Don't give me the blog post, give me the tweet. And I think I would really encourage you, it might not look like it, but I'm really like a Notion minimalist. What I would really encourage you, so don't make it a database, make it a table. Don't make it a table, make it a page. Don't make it a page, like make it like a list or toggles. And if you really kind of like everything that you see here, that if you follow the 80-20 rule, could be done with pages and toggles and lazy checkboxes, like non-table checkboxes. I could be if you want to measure productivity, like without doing any of this, I would be an 80 with just using toggles and pages. Now this, like all this fancy schmancy stuff and surfing imagery that you see, that gets me from like an 80 to an 86.5.
Yeah.
That 6.5 is not worth it for most people.
Right.
It's worth it to me because this is my job and it's my passion. So it's aligned on those two dimensions. But for the like non-Notion weirdos, that 6.5% is probably not worth it to you. That 6.5% is probably better spent learning a new skill or reading a book or like calling your mom. So I would just remember that, especially like you can get so caught up in these like elaborate Notion setups.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Any questions or should I keep going?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you do have a question, don't forget to pop it in the ask a question area below, and we'll make sure to get that answer. But otherwise, I think the only question that's come in so far that was in when the event started was thoughts on family planning in Notion. My wife and I are disorganized without a new babe to add to the mix. We want to have our first child in the next year or two. Any thoughts on how to keep screen time down while organizing with a new person in the family?
Whoa.
Big question.
Yeah, that is. Any thoughts on keeping screen time
And
down?
I'm wondering if he's referring to
His own,
like the
like
time, I
their
guess, to
screen time,
organize
not.
your own system, or yeah.
Yeah, so let's pull in. So I had to do two family CFOs because I had to like clean up some of the data. But one place that is like super helpful is your finances.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't lying about the surfing imagery. I
That's
just came
awesome.
back from the beach too. I like ran up. So I want to show. So okay. There's a statistic that says executives. I don't know the source, but I found it on the internet, so it must be true. That said the average executive spends 6 weeks of their year looking for information. And so I want so to answer to so take the new dad, and maybe the new dad maybe I hope they're not an executive as well. I mean, I hope they are because maybe they're more financially comfortable, but like they don't have 6 weeks to look for files. And so the starting point is like, do you just have a central place for
Right.
everything? And I think this is where I think this is I would answer this ask the person who asked this question like it's less of a Notion question and more of a like, do you know, like, does everything have a logical home? Right. And so, Para is an easy framework to follow. I know
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us use it or use some version of it. So I would start like, do you have a framework? And I would I think the real fun part of Para is the areas part because it's kind of that in between. Like it doesn't really have a task associated with it always, but it's still like very important.
Important.
And resources is like if you didn't read about your crypto passion, like you're probably going to be okay. And like in like the task, like you're probably going to remember to pay your rent and like do like the thing that your boss wants you to do. But that like middle sleeve is like really really nebulous and tricky. So I would say I would tell this question this person to start with that like the 10,000 foot view before you even step foot in Notion. Uh,
Right.
then here's like a little fun thing is that when you have your tasks in a separate table, now we're getting a little bit more Notion advanced. You can link your tasks to every area in your life. And so this is my favorite part about Notion is that when I go in to this financial area, these are tasks from my master task list that are just they're there. Like I'm thinking about finances. The two things I need to think about is this email and this loss. I wish it was a gain. And so that's a very helpful thing. I would put that in the intermediate Notion skill category. So it's not answering this person's question. And then I would say like find the columns that work for you. Right. And so I again, Tiago, a big influence of mine, he says when he goes through everyone's notes, he's seen elaborate and, Evernote and Notion setups. And he said that the people come back, they use like 2% of their notes and they use them all the time. And so find out what those things are. Right. And so for me, I try to use like 2 or 3 columns. It's going to depend on the different areas. But, I tend to have something that's like frequently accessed, high use. It's those pages that you're always coming to. When you come to your finance, like what are you always coming to? And so, here you have like these money reviews where we like go through things together with my wife. It's like a down view of our finances. This view, like things related to our home, things related to our car, like maintenance schedules. It's not like I'd be lying. Like the deeper you get away from my home screen, the messier it gets. But again, the point is like, can I find it, right? Like what's the log on my car on 11/19th, I had an oil change and it cost $64, right? Like that's not that useful information, but at my next oil change, it's very useful. And I don't want to be that executive that spends 6 weeks looking for it when I just know like, oh, I have a carve page inside my finance page. So
one of my philosophies on that too is like, could I take a stranger and drop them in my space and could they figure out where to find something? That's kind of how I try to engineer it. It should be very intuitive. There shouldn't be like a, where did I save that? It's very literal. Like the car is here, the home is here, it's meal planning is here.
Totally. And that's where the, Para, that's some version of Para is helpful. So you go here and this like, it's quite organized. The names are descriptive enough, but I guide my eyes to this left section because it's like, this is where I spend my time. So to this question asker's point, like, have the right dimensions: finances, health, kid, spouse. Job is a little too broad, but let's talk about family stuff. And then have a column, right? Or it doesn't even need to be a column, just like a top section that's like, these are the things that I'll come back to. This is the 80-20, right? It's like always like, what's the 80-20? And again, I'll repeat it because you and I are not guilty of it, but we can give the impression that we're focused on the 20. But we're really focused about the 80. It just gets confusing because we spend a lot of time talking about the 20.
Yeah, true.
So, and so that would be how I organize. And while we're here, this is just like a cool little thing. I'm a ex-finance guy. So this is sanitized data, so it doesn't do anything. But I do check quarterly assets over like just to keep track of the financial picture. And so what this does here is it draws information. It draws like the type of account. I can look at different, taxable, tax deferred. But the cool thing here is that it combines formulas. And so, the current balance of this hypothetical portfolio is, $417,000 or $417. But what I do here is, now I'm using my finance background. I say like, based on the type of investment it is, it has like an expected return, like what you think it would bring you. And I convert that into dollars, but it also has an expected loss. Like what if the world goes to hell? And so I can constantly see, what is like my portfolio should be making, again, at a theoretical perspective in dollars every year. But I could also see like, what can it lose if we had like another financial crisis? Again, these are all estimates, but these are just like little, like I said, I'm always just dropping myself little cues, because when I update this every quarter, then I go in here and I'm like, oh yeah, like, okay, I don't like that number. That's really high. Or like, how am I going to, how will that impact me? So again, this is in the more advanced side, but it's a frequently accessed document within kind of the family CFO page. So I can keep going at it. Let me know, Marie, if you have questions or there are questions. There's one fun thing I want to show.
Yeah, no, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So the other place is I go into intent, which is again like not being reactive, like set the agenda for myself. And so again, it's just like the most basic daily tracker. It doesn't link to, I don't have fancy trackers like you do, Marie. But it's just like, there are 4 things I want to do every day. I want to meditate twice a day, and these are tomatoes. I want to do 2 25-minute Pomodoros, uninterrupted work, no bathroom breaks, no water breaks, no checking email. Oftentimes I turn off my Wi-Fi during those breaks. And again, it's so simple. Anyone can do this. No Notion expertise required, but it's just a cue. It's like, oh, did I do that today? It doesn't even, I don't even have the fancy progress bars or anything. It's just the cue. It's the gym shoes by the door to remind me that these 4 things move the needle. Those are the big dominoes. So on intent, what I'm trying to do here is resurface up, give myself clues on the highest impact things across all the dimensions of my life. So takes me to my next thing. One of my ideas. My ideas are really important. And so I surface up. This is my editorial calendar. I'm usually working on 3-ish blog posts at any point in time. And so it just reminds me of like these are the highest ranked. Again, this is my master calendar, and I can go in and I never look at it this way. But then if I go back, it just surfaced up the key things. Show me the 4-star ranked and show me the 5-star ranked. Show me the 4-star ranked. I don't
And
want to
how
see.
is that ranking? Is that just like a personal, like I think these ideas are strongest or what I want to pursue, or what is that ranking system?
Exactly. Yeah. Those are, it's a personal ranking that's added over time. And sometimes I'm like, renegotiate agreements. That sounded like a 4 when I added it, but you know what? It's a 3, and then it pops out. Then this is my favorite part. So again, resurfacing things up. This is going to get a little bit complicated, but basically I have an algorithm, or I should say a formula, that scores the articles in my reading list. And it does it off of different information. I'm lucky in that I write an email newsletter. So I actually, at the end of each issue, I go back to my library, which is, by the way, where I stage my newsletter, and I just click, this was the most read story. So that's a little clue. But when I click that field, it assigns it like a point system. Like it gives it like 3 points. And then if I wrote a description in it, that means that there was something about it that I liked. I might add another point. So it'll be 4-point article. And if it was like if I included it on RadReads in the top 2 stories, I include 5 stories, maybe it's like half a point. And so I aggregate this score together and I do that same test against modified date. So I say, have you modified, i.e. looked at this article in the last, I think in this month, it's like the last year. Like you said, of the 1,000 articles you read, these 10 have a rank, like they've like fit this criteria that you've pre-described. So you really like these articles and you haven't looked at them in the past year. Do you want to do something with them? And so, this is like a fantastic Gia Tolentino article on like time. And so like I would go in here, maybe I would like take a scan at it. Maybe I would like do what Tiago says, like remix it, do something with it, add a little description. Or I could just be like, yeah, nothing to do with it. And so I have what I call the clicker. It has no value to it other than when I click it, it changes the modified date. So watch what happens when it's like a review though. It's like, okay, this article, nothing to do here, gone. All that click did was change the modified date and it popped out of my formula. And then lastly, on the spirit of being more intentional, I'm just keeping track of all the upcoming birthdays in the next month. And again, it's just because I want to like my CRM is not to like remember that someone likes spinach. It's to like show, like be a good friend, and be an intentional friend. And birthdays are just like a really easy win to guarantee that you stay in touch with everyone at least once a year. So that is like a neat little part. And then the last thing, I mean, there's so many things I could show, but the last thing that is kind of cool is tasks. And I was telling Marie before we went live, I totally ripped this off her setup. I didn't even know how to do this, that I had to like sit and stare at the super organizer's article and be like, okay, so that's an image, that's a call out, columns. Okay. Oh, now I see how I could do it. And so this is like, I try to hit this once a day, at least once. I really try to keep it simple. If I hit those 3 pages once a day, I've covered a lot of surface area on my life, because the cues will tell me where to focus my attention. Mm-hmm. And so here, classic GTD, these are tasks that don't have, they're not assigned to anything. So they need, they need a home. So this would go into my lead magnet project. Develop new lead magnets, hit it, gone. These are the big dominoes. Remember, these things move the needle. I like the bowling pin emoji for that, right? Like you hit, like you hit the top pin and then they all fall. So these are things that move the needle. They tend to take more time. And unlike you and some of the other guests, like I don't do a lot of like task sequencing. Where it's like, I'm going to work on this on Monday, I'm going to work on this on Tuesday, or like, to me, I keep a little bit more of the serendipity, and I don't have a lot of defined deadlines. So like, I'm kind of playing in this like serendipity land. And so I just kind of like, I really do take that like energy and like, when does the inspiration hit you? But if I'm going to keep seeing like parse the DYD survey, like at some point I'm going to be sick of it. And I've already told myself, this moves the needle. This is a big domino. I can't, I won't let myself remove it from there. So I'm going to have to just do it. Conduct an SEO audit like that. That might actually have to turn into a project, because that has like multiple legs. Due soon, that's pretty straightforward. I do ask myself, is this a true deadline? Because sometimes it could just be like resurfaced somewhere. And then you have like those 3 BHAGs. And again, here it's a little different. This is more like a log, just to show me. I'm so excited that at the end of the year, there will be at least 52 items, right? For something like quite nebulous, surf new spots without fear. Like that's not, like you can't just like, I don't know. It's
hard to measure. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't measure it. You can't like put it on your calendar, but you can, right? Like I surfed Malibu, like I changed my fin setup. I surfed Haggerty's. So like you can, like I had a lesson. I just had a lesson this morning. And so like every week I have to do something to advance towards this goal. It's not super scientific. There are weeks where I will not do it. But again, this is like the closest thing to a log meets a tracker, meets a task manager that moves like with these big goals, true commitment to service. Like I set up these different things, and I'm just like I'm excited to watch these grow, and that as seeing them grow will give them their own sense of momentum going forward.
We had a question come in. Michael asked, shouldn't I be thinking about the little dominoes that will eventually knock over the big ones at the end of the row?
It's a great question. So the little dominoes are just tasks. And absolutely. And like, that's the thing, right? Like, that's the beautiful duality of life, right? Where you can't only look at little dominoes and you can't only look at big dominoes. You can't only do process and you can't only let serendipity take you. You can't, and so like, I wish, Michael, that there was an answer, like do 20% in big dominoes and 80%. Maybe that works for some people. It does not work for me. So I need to I almost it's like a sail. Like I need to know that I'm moving in the right direction and have like a rudder to kind of like readjust. Don't get me wrong. Like my little dominoes, like they're getting done, especially the little dominoes that have consequences if I don't fail them, if I don't complete them. Yeah. And so, and then the other thing I would say is, If you look at this, these are all little dominoes wrapped into one big domino, right? There's going to be 52 of these. Those are some little dominoes. And at the end, so like I've almost inverted this because like I can't do one action and surf new spots without fear. I can do one action and conduct an SEO audit on my site, which will have really good repercussions, positive consequences. So you've got to learn how to play on both. You got to learn how to play on both sides of the continuum, which is, again, and it's not, I'm not here to plug Notion, but like if you use Todoist, I think it would be hard. Even OmniFocus, I love OmniFocus, and I still use it for a sliver of my life. It would be hard to bounce between those two edges of the continuum with a very narrowly scoped tool.
Yeah, and I think if we only focus on the little dominoes, so I think sometimes it's easy to get off track because like the little things like tug at us and pull at us, and we sort of forget, oh wait, I said this was important, but these little things, these little distractions kind of pull you in different directions and you kind of get off course. So I love what you said about like you kind of have to do both and always have them top of mind. So the fact that you've got this tasks, but these are like big tasks and little tasks all in one place, so you can just sort of see the big picture and the little stuff all in one go, I think is really key.
And Michael, one thing that I like think about the 5-year bobblehead, and it's going to depend on, phase of life, current work circumstances, but I try to do something that my 5-year-old future self would be smiling at once a day. It could be for 5 minutes. I try to do it for 25. But think about the compounding of that, right? Because the thing about little dominoes is that they compound, but they compound linearly. Big dominoes give you that like step function jump.
I wonder if that comes from your finance background too, where you're like, I know the benefits of compounding interest, and like, right? Totally. Like the little bets that you make today are going to just massively increase your future success.
Totally. But if you just think in little bets, like sometimes you're gonna like miss the, you'll miss the big picture. So like finding that right trade-off. And so I do think, because I'm a coach. I coach like a lot of high performing executives and entrepreneurs, and they come to me and they're like, my whole life is react mode. They say, I have no time to do deep thinking. They're CEOs of companies with hundreds of employees. And they're coming to me saying, I have no time to do deep thinking. And so same thing that I told Michael, 10 minutes. Start with 10, move to 15, move to 20, baby steps. And so also just being realistic, right? That's why I would say, like, if you could have 5 minutes to start this, it can move the needle. 5 minutes of big thinking applied over 5 years will definitely lead to some big dominoes.
Awesome. Jesse asked, is there a great source for pre-made coded layouts? I'd be lying if I said I could replicate codes and formulas. I know that you mentioned you had a blog post about this. So if there's anything that you think would be helpful for the viewers afterward, we'll definitely send out a sort of recap with any useful links and that sort of thing. And or if you have any specific recommendations. I know there's lots of amazing people out there who've made, tons of publicly available formulas. And like, I'm not a coder, but I just kind of pull and adjust and play, and I'm always kind of tweaking with the formulas, and it takes a bit of time to wrap your brain around. But so many people have done the legwork that it gives you a good place to start with.
Totally. And I think, and no one told me to say this, but following Notion pros on their primary medium is probably the best way. So like my primary medium is Twitter. And so these formulas are probably like floating around in my Twitter feed. I try to, once there's enough momentum, I'll do it in a blog post. Like yours, I would say yours is YouTube for sure. A lot of people's are YouTube, some are email. William Nutt is like probably a hybrid of a lot. Some are Reddit. So I would say, Facebook, like, if you pick like a few of your favorite Notion pros and just follow them on their primary medium, you probably get a lot of their kind of templates and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Was there anything else that you wanted to show in your setup, or things that we didn't get to cover? Or I'd also be curious, like, it sounds like from a day-to-day perspective, you obviously have these like routines and rituals. Do you go through a sort of weekly review or like yearly planning process, or kind of how often do you do that sort of big, 10-year thinking as part of your process?
Yeah, so that it's been a newer part, of trying to really think big, and it goes to Michael's question, which was that, like, I was doing a lot of little domino stuff for a very long time, and as a solopreneur, like, I mean, the list of little dominoes is like 150 every day, and you could do
Yeah.
10% if you're lucky, and so part of it was by default. I do a weekly. A weekly. I'm going to go back in. It's in. So I'm going to do Control P. My students are like, "You go so fast! Like, we don't even know what you're doing," because I don't use the mouse. So I just did Control P, which pulls me up. And so I do these like weekly check-ins with myself, where what worked, what didn't work, did I live my values, how did I do on the BHAGs? Like, course, nailed it. Big epic day with Glenn, plus on my short board, slipping a little bit on service, fixed it up. So I do this, and then I just do these like little check marks just to keep myself accountable. So that's probably the most extensive. But again, it's in the big picture planning. It's still kind of like at the end of the year, pen and paper,
Yeah.
lot of journaling. So I definitely don't have like a specific routine on that.
Cool. Another question came in. How do you manage your resources? Example, when you curate your newsletter, do you ever delete them? Do you review them the same day to remember context, etc.? And sort of related too, I was curious, I noticed that I didn't see like a notes area. So if you have just kind of random thoughts that float by, or you're like, oh, I want to investigate something, do you kind of immediately turn that into an action, or do you kind of like start up a newsletter? Like, what's your process around note creation?
Yes. So around newsletter creation, I will go back. So I have a colleague who helps me collate the newsletter. Around newsletter, so now I'm going to pop into JJ Library. So this is the scoring system, by the way, that I was telling you about, that just grabs different, like, it is basically assigning values based on different fields being selected, and then it links, and then it aggregates them here, and then I filter by the score. In terms of the newsletter setup, so here's a little there's a little Notion trick where people like to do high, medium, low. Like, say you're ranking something, they'll do high, medium, low. I just do medium and high, because if I didn't tag something, then by default it's low. Mm-hmm. And so it saves me one click, and then I can start filtering off of, like, is that field empty, to just like quickly cut through the noise. Right? So again, it's like, just by tagging something high or medium, you're giving your future self the possibility to be more successful. So that's one trick for newsletter, and for just Notion tables in general. And then the other, which is obvious, I don't think it always defaults to it, but it's always searched by by most recently added. So like, it always, like, especially when you're coming with like content and ideas, like, you just want to see what you added most recently. Even tasks, right? The task that you added today versus the task that you added a year ago, the task today probably has higher information content. So again, those are just like two little things. They're subtle, but they can, again, it's all about positioning things so that they can be more they can just be more available, more surfaced up to you. So in terms of my newsletter workflow, it's actually quite straightforward. I go in here, and these eyes are like, articles that I'm looking for. We just ran issue 252. I'm sorry, 251. We just queued up. So I just will go in and type in 251 here, just to get them pulled into the current issue. And then I'll go into our prep. These are the 5 articles. These are the rankings. This is who referred it. This is the URL. And then I hand it off to my colleague, and she does some manual copying and pasting and organizing it into ConvertKit. And then when week 252 comes, I wish it was fancier. I'll go. I already set up that I want to add this one in 252. And so I never need to archive anything, because it just starts to flow to the bottom, basically. And I keep the relevant things to the top with these little, just with one flag, these little eyeballs. And then I can always see, right? I could say, show me every story that was ever included in RadReads by going to RR issue is not empty, right? That's why using the not empty tag, I'll just delete this one for now. And you'll see here, right there with one little filter, I could say if you want to think of all the things I've read, the best ones are probably the ones I shared in my newsletter. And so I can surface it up. I could quickly get to it that way. And everything that doesn't have this goes back to using empty fields as indicators. You couldn't be bothered to add something into that field, so you can't care about it that much. And so it quickly sorts it out. And maybe you have some catch-all review where you go through it and mark things as archived. I don't. I especially with content, I think of it like a giant river where it just keeps going. And if you step out of the river for a little while, sure, you'll miss something, but you're going to be just fine. Right. New good content will find you in the river of content before you even know it.
I used to kind of clip anytime I was reading any sort of blog post, I was always clipping them into my space, but I realized not everything I read is something if it wasn't a great article, there's no point in me clipping it just to be I read that article. So I don't know if you can relate to this, but I've started to only kind of pull the high value stuff that I know this is important. I know this is connected to the ideas that I'm interested in right now, and not just save everything just as a giant catch-all of everything that I'm reading.
See, I take the opposite approach where I'll just grab it just for the cue, because I never read when I grab ever. And I have I have fixed reading times for the most part, and so I just grab, and for example, I know that I saw this article really grab my attention, but I'm probably not going to read it. It was where was it? It was something about Mark. Oh, the sort is off. Oh, that's it.
Probably about running your life inside a Notion or something like that.
But it was something about Mark Jacob, like the tormented life of Mark Jacobs. And I was that sounded really good. But I was I don't know if I need to read that. And so what will happen is, it's not a newsletter article. Once it leaves this kind of top panel, it becomes much harder to find. It has no tag, so it will kind of just disappear. And that's totally cool, because I didn't need to read it anyway. So that's kind of how I would approach that one.
Interesting. So yeah, you don't delete stuff from your library on the regular.
I don't delete at all. I think that, to me, deleting is just it's actually an unnecessary step. It's a little bit like the different, remember when Gmail came out? And my dad still emails. He's I want to delete my Gmail. I want to put it in the trash. And I'm like, Dad, you don't delete Gmail. You just you just stop seeing it. And so I kind of use that approach to Notion, as long as it's not creating any noise or burden for, if it's creating a burden for me, I need to re-examine the process. But because it can just kind of pop out on the bottom and like I'll never see it, then it's just like, okay, cool. If it were to slow things down or something, I might do something differently.
Cool. Any other questions for Khe as you've sort of seen his system and seen his process? I'm sure that there's like so many other like parts and things that we could,
Oh yeah,
drill
I would.
into.
Or anything else? Fine. I mean, like if you go into like you asked where are our notes, it's like I clean things up a little, but like I'll use things I'll use toggles a lot, right? Like, so like I had like possible launch partners, like I'm thinking as names come up, I'll either, I can either get to this toggle quite quickly because like I know that like that's something, and I'll drop it in there. Like I was keeping track of the countries, like where all the students came from. So like that's like my notes will probably be like buried in different areas within toggles. And then over time, they'll be like, if I come back to them often, they'll like get like organized into something like a little bit more structured, like a table. But that's really like it's got to really clear a threshold of importance for me to invest the time.
A great question came in from Cassie. Do you ever use the calendar view functionality to get a high-level overview of upcoming dates? I know you had said that a lot of your tasks and to-dos aren't necessarily very date-specific, but maybe in terms of planning a launch or planning things, I noticed that you don't often use the calendar view, or we haven't seen one, so I'm curious if that's a thing.
Yeah, that's a very, very astute observation, Cassie. I would say it's two things. I don't have a lot of deadlines, and the only real deadline that I have is like when I launch a course, which is 3 or 4 times a year. So the launch calendars, I will some of it will be in calendars. I don't like calendars because they take up too much space. So even if I were to use a calendar, I would probably format it as a table, and I would sort it by date. Because to me, like being able to rattle through things chronologically, like a line by line basis, is like much more, for me, cognitively efficient to do. The other thing, though, and this gets back to GTD, is GTD is really against due dates. And the reason that's why it has a review function, because what GTD will say is, and I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit, it will say the only thing that should have due dates are things that have severe consequences if you don't do it by that date. Nothing else should have a due date. And what happens is that people set false due date, or not false, they like set made up dates to force themselves to do something as like almost like a hack. And what GTD would say, and this is something I really subscribe to, is that what you're doing wrong is you don't have the right review function. And so if you look at, like, I don't have a lot of due dates, because my work's structured in a way that I don't have a lot of due dates. But even when I did work a corporate job, I didn't have a lot of due dates, but I had a lot of review functions. I still use OmniFocus for a slice of my life. And so the dates are there. They're incorporated into the review functions. And if I'm doing, if I'm like being true to like my personal workflow, I'm not like just checking the review and being like, blah, click, done, like next. Like I'm going in, I'm looking at all the tasks. And what GTD would say is like, you have to look at all the tasks. You then have to decide if there are any that are worth discarding. And then you have to decide if they need more metadata, which one of the metadata things is a due date. And so that would be the workflow to adding due dates. But to Cassie's point, I think I tried to use a launch a calendar view for one of my launches, and I ended up going back to a table view. So I don't think I have a single calendar view across my entire setup.
Yeah, similarly, I think I don't really tend to rely on the calendar view for stuff. If it's helpful for you, I think that's what's beautiful about it, right? It's like if your brain works differently and you prefer to see a calendar view, you can totally set it up that way. But like you, one of the changes that I've made too in my task management is I don't assign things by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It'll be like today, tomorrow, next, or someday. There's sort of like a bit more flexibility there. And then I can do it by context. And I have deep work, quick wins, essential, and that's basically, based
Totally.
on the like impact and effort. And so I just kind of have one field that helps me kind of figure those out. So that way I've got a deep work day. I know these are the deep work activities I need to get done today. And that to me is more helpful than just like specific dates. But of course that depends. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, just that it depends, right? If you work with clients and you have specific deliverables and due dates, but
exactly. And what you've done there, right? You've combined the GTD approach, right, by using context, right? GTD is very much like add metadata to really be specific about when you do things, and then you've layered in. You were unfamiliar with the book, but you've layered in Tony Schwartz's approach, where you manage energy to tasks.
Yeah.
Right.
And
like when you're in a
even,
deep work mode, you're probably high energy.
Exactly. And I think I got this from Taylor Pearson as well, where he adds another layer. I think he combines 3 or 4 of those things where it's like unique abilities as well. Like, so is this a task that only I can do? And then $10,000 tasks, $1,000 tasks, $100 tasks, and $10 tasks. So if I say a task is a daily grind, it actually has a little message that says delegate, like do not do this task. That's not something that you should be doing. So it kind of combines a few of those methodologies.
That's funny. Yeah, because that's your little domino, big domino.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. The essentials versus the daily grind. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this tour and display of your process. I think it's always just so awesome to see, again, the different ways that people even apply para. Like we both use para, but we apply it in very different ways, but it works for us and it works for the way our brains work, right? So
totally. And I would, well, thank you, Marie. You have been, it's like such an inspiration, and it's just like fun to be in this tribe of incredible people. And thank all of you for, I'm actually going to go back and read all the comments because I just love hearing what people say. I saw a few people say like, I'm a rad reader. I saw like Pierce Smith shout us out. So thank you all. I'm sorry I didn't get to respond to your individual comments, but I'm going to. And yeah, I want to, I encourage, like I said, my primary Notion space is Twitter. I respond to, if as long as you're polite, I respond to every single question on Twitter about Notion. So you could find me there. You can just email me directly. But again, like, please remember when you watch these office hours, think about the 80-20, right? Think about that Naval quote. If it's a book, it's like, don't give me the book, give me the podcast. Don't give me the podcast, give me the blog post. Don't give me the blog post, give me the tweet. Find your tweet. Start with your tweet. And then build up. Don't get caught up in the shiny toys. Ask yourself the big question. What does my 5-year future self want me to be working on? What moves the needle in these important? Who are the most important stakeholders in my life? Then build your setups around those questions versus like, can I say, like, dynamically say, this is, 6 days overdue, or can I do like a fancy progress bar?
That's all bonus layering, right? That's like icing on the cake. Yeah.
Totally.
Amazing. So we have a link below, so you can quickly jump to RadReads if you want to check out that community.
Yeah,
and then I
pop
just
onto the newsletter. We got
Twitter.
some great stuff. There's like Notion stuff. There's just life examination stuff. Money, marriage, relationships, kids, all that stuff. So yeah, and we have a Slack group too. So you'll find, if you sign up in the newsletter, you'll get invited to the Slack group. So
yeah, it sounds like people found this really helpful and inspirational. So
awesome.
we'll do a follow-up send out of any like blog posts that you think would be helpful for folks, or any links that you want to send out. We'll make sure that people get connected with those. Thank you so much. Cool. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you all, everyone across the world. You guys are incredible. And I'm just like so thrilled to have gotten to spend than 90 minutes with Marie and you all. And thank you, Notion, for creating this space for us.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.